Go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast once again. Today we are doing the Pac-12, and we're doing over/under win totals. And of course, Jacob Serbensky is back on the podcast for the first time in quite a while. Actually, I don't know how many months it's been by now.
But which is actually one of the ones that I had my stats done for. So we are going to start with the Pac-12 North and the defending champions of the Pac-12 North, the Oregon Ducks, who had a very disappointing end to last season. But they have, outside of like 2 games, a pretty easy schedule. Now, don't get me wrong. They start with a neutral site game against Georgia. That's not going to be fun.
I mean, it is neutral site, but it's in Atlanta. That's not really necessarily much of a neutral site.
And it's Georgia. I don't care where the neutral site is. I'm taking Georgia in that game. But then you've got Eastern Washington and BYU. You got at Washington State, Stanford, at Arizona, UCLA, at Cal, at Colorado, Washington, Utah at home, and at Oregon State. They're half. The biggest thing for this schedule is a lot of the games that they were already going to win are pretty much on the road. Like whether Cal or Colorado were at home or on the road, I would have picked them to win. So right now, my losses that I have for them, I only have 2 regular season losses for them. I have them losing to Georgia in the beginning of the week, and then I have them tripping up against Washington State early on because there's going to be some transfers in there. So I feel like tripping up at Washington State isn't too crazy out of whack. Stanford at home, they win. UCLA at home, I would still probably have them winning that. At Cal and at Colorado, I have them winning. At home against Washington. Utah is the other toss-up, but with it being at home, I would probably favor them in it. And then at probably favor them in it. So I'm going to go over. Realistically, I think their floor is like 8-4 because their schedule is ridiculously easy outside of that first game. They do draw Utah, but they don't draw USC from the other side, which is nice. So I think realistically, Georgia's a loss, and then take your picks between, I think, Washington State, Utah, and at Washington State, at Oregon State, and Utah. Personally, have them only losing to trip up Washington State. So I have them winning the Pac-12 North very easily. So I have them going over.
Yeah, I think I'm going over as well. As much as Oregon actually play, honestly, I look at Oregon's schedule. They play a decent amount of like good teams, but they're all at home. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, Georgia they're not beating. They're gonna lose to Georgia at the beginning of the season. But you look at the rest of the home games. The rest of their games. I mean, at home you have BYU, Stanford, UCLA, Washington, and Utah. I mean, that's probably the best teams out of and those are the best teams that they got, and they're all at home. The road games, Washington State is the best road team they're playing. They're not losing to Arizona. I hope they don't lose to Arizona.
Arizona and lost. Remember that? I think that was 28. That was when I first moved here because I remember because my TV was not even hung up; it was on the floor. Because I just moved here, it was on the floor, and I had it on in my room. And I checked the score, and Oregon was down like 44-10. Do you remember that?
Was that Arizona or was that Arizona State?
That was Arizona. Hang on. Oregon versus Arizona. It was a like whack score. 44-15. Arizona beat them 44-15 on October 27th, 2018. So literally like a week after I moved here.
But either way, I would hope they don't do that against Arizona. And then and then against Cal and Colorado, neither of those teams are any good. They should beat both of them. Oregon State is the only toss up. But I give this team at least 9 wins, maybe even 10. So yeah, I go over for them. Because like I said, because Utah, Washington are both Utah's a really good team, but that's a home game. Oregon has a chance there. Washington is a okay team on the road. That'd be a really difficult one, but they're at home for that. So I think they got a good chance there. UCLA is another interesting team. They have a solid overall team, but again, Oregon's at home. Stanford, I don't think they'll lose to Stanford, but Stanford can give teams problems. Oregon's at home again. BYU's a good team, but that's a home game. So they have their biggest opponents all at home, which is a big advantage for Oregon, considering that they literally have one of the craziest fan bases ever. That the Autzen Zoo goes insane. So I think that Oregon should have a good time this season, and yeah, I think they're easily the favorites to win this side of the division.
For sure. And now we go to Washington State, who their win total is actually pretty low at 5.5. Considering their schedule. Considering their schedule is pretty nice, not crazy. You've got Idaho, then you've got at Wisconsin, then you've got Colorado State to round out the non-conference. Then you've got Oregon, you've got Cal, you've got at USC and at Oregon State. Then you've got Utah and at Stanford. That is a pretty brutal stretch. But then you've got Arizona State at Arizona and Washington. So I have them going 75. I think they could easily go 6-6, but that's still above that 5.5 win total. Right now, their losses that I have is at Wisconsin, at USC, at Oregon State, Utah, and at Stanford. I have them barely edging out Oregon, but I think they could lose that game. I have them beating Arizona State and Washington at home, and I definitely have them beating Arizona on the road. And I have them beating Cal. So I have them at 7-5. I could see 6-6 because I think that Oregon game's a toss-up, but I mean, Cal, Arizona State, Arizona, and Washington should all be wins. And then Idaho and Colorado State are pretty easy non-con games. The only non-con game is Wisconsin. So I see them at least at 6-6, but I have them at 7-5, which I feel like Washington State's just that team that always goes 6-6 or 7-5. So I've got Washington State at 7-5, but I still think even at 6, and even at 6-6, they still go over that 5.5 win total. So I have them over.
Yeah, for the Cougars, I have them going 6-6. They'll go 500, but that's still over. So I pick them to go over.
It's for their schedule. 5.5 is pretty is decently low. I mean, for their schedule, it's not a crazy hard schedule.
For Washington State, whether they're gonna go 500 or not, I think it's gonna come down to their game against the Huskies. It's gonna come down to the Apple Cup. If they win that game, they make it to a bowl game. Otherwise, they don't. I think it's gonna come down to that game, and it's a home game for Washington State. I'm not really that high on Washington because really their entire team's dependent on whether Michael Penix returns to form or not. I'm not high on the fact that he will, so I'm giving it to the Cougars, who already have a head coach who was already there kind of last year, was the intern. So I'm giving it to the Cougars. I'm gonna have them go 6-6. They'll go just over that 5.5 mark.
Yeah, Oregon State, Utah, and at Stanford stretch is brutal. That is a brutal stretch.
Yeah.
Especially the three of USC, Oregon, and on the road, and then Utah. All right, so let's go over on that one, and now we go to the Washington Huskies, who have a much higher win total, 7.5. That's crazy. Kent State, Portland State, and Michigan State to round out the non-con. Then they Stanford, UCLA, Arizona at home. They take on Cal on the road. Oregon State at home. On the road against Oregon. Colorado at home and at Washington State. Even with them losing all those road games, I still have them. That still puts them squarely, in my opinion, at 6-6. That's a bowl team. Definitely under the win total by a game and a half. But I have them beating Kent State and Portland State. I have them losing to Michigan State, but I think that game could definitely be a win. If Michigan State has to come up to the Pacific time zone. Stanford at home, I have them edging out and winning. UCLA and State on the road are both losses. I have Arizona, them beating Arizona. Cal's not that good, but I have them losing on the road to Cal because I feel bad for Cal. So I give them the home game against Washington. I have them winning at home against Oregon State and Colorado, and then losing on the road to Oregon and Washington State, which sits them squarely at 6-6. So under the win total, but bowl team nonetheless.
For Washington, I'll probably give them 7-5, which since the over under was 7.5, that's still under. Michigan State is and like I always highlighted like I did like with Washington State. I highlighted a game of where they'd go over under that total. I think Michigan State is going to be that game that
Yeah.
determines whether they go over or under that total, or
Yeah.
even Washington State. I don't really know which one, but it's
I mean,
going to be
obviously,
dependent on
State.
those two games there.
Yeah,
But I'll
definitely. I
go
mean,
with
Stanford
them
beat
getting at
Arizona.
least they'll get 6 or 7 wins. I'll give them one more. I'll go 7-5. But I think they'll probably lose to UCLA, Arizona State, Oregon, and Oregon, even Oregon State or Washington State. So that's why I go about 7-5. Maybe they lose to Michigan State and go 6-6, but they'll probably still at least make a bowl game.
And I'm doing this in my stat sheet, so in order of how it finished based off the ranking. So right under them, I had the Oregon State Beavers. We have their win total at 6.5. You've got you've got a tough non-conference with Boise State at home, and then you go on the road to play Fresno State, which, if I'm not mistaken, Jake Hayner's still there, right? He didn't. He ended up not transferring.
Yeah, that is correct.
Transferring.
He ended up staying.
So they got to go on the road to Fresno State, and then they play Montana State, and then they get a tough Pac-12 at Utah. Then they go on the road to Stanford. They play Washington State and Colorado. They play at Washington, then at home against Cal, Arizona State, and Oregon. I have them squarely under this at 6-6. I have them losing the game to Fresno State. I have them losing to USC and Utah. I do have them beating Stanford on the road, but that could be beating Washington State and Colorado at home. I have them losing on the road to Washington, which is what puts them just under Washington. I have them winning at home against Cal, and then I have them narrowly losing to Oregon. Could go take it as a maybe either beat Arizona, but they're probably 6-6. Good, but really hurts them. So give me 6-6 and give me just under.
For Oregon State, this is a decent team, but they have a really rough opening start to the year with Boise State and Fresno State. Those are two good teams, and while Boise State is at home, that's not an easy team. Boise State was pretty good last year. Fresno State is also a really good team, even if they do have a brand new coach. But I forget what his name was, but he was with Fresno State before their recent head coach, who was Kalen DeBoer, went to Washington and became their new head coach. The guy they have now was Jed Tedford. He was a guy. He was a head coach for them in 2019. I think he left because of health issues, but now he's coming back and is coaching once again for Fresno State. But as for Oregon State, they probably won't. I think it's a 50-50 whether they beat Boise State or Fresno State. Those are going to be two really good games to start off the year. They beat Montana State. They won't beat USC or Utah. Stanford, I give them the edge on. Since Washington State is home, I'll give them that too. And Colorado as well. Um, I don't know if I can give them Washington though. They'll beat Cal, and then Arizona State and Oregon are gonna be tough. So if I do that, I'm looking at 6-6 probably here too. So I'll go under as well. This is a solid Oregon State team, but this is a very rough schedule as well.
Yeah.
So I am going to go just under. I'll go at least 500 for the Beavers. Or yeah.
They get the top four. They get like the top four teams of the South. So they have a terrible South pool, and they have hard non-conference games. So where is Stanford on this list? Stanford is sitting at 4.5 wins. They open the season relatively easy against Colgate, and then they play USC. And then they go on the road to Washington and on the road to Oregon. They play home against Oregon State. Then they go to South Bend to play Notre Dame. Then they got Arizona State at home. They've got UCLA on the road. They got Washington State at home. Then they go to Utah. They got Cal at home and round out the season at home against BYU.
Cal's a road game.
I meant to say Cal's a road game. I do have an exact count. Cal is on the road and then BYU is at home. So, have them beating Colgate, and then I have them dropping the next 5. I have them beating Colgate, and then I have them losing to USC, losing to Washington, losing to Oregon State, and losing at Notre Dame. I think the only winnable game out of that 5-game stretch is at home against Oregon State. Those other ones are pretty much quick losses. I have them beating at UCLA, Washington State at home. I have them winning. Utah at home, or Utah on the road, I do not have them winning. And then I was favorable to them, and I gave them at Cal and at home against BYU. So 5 and 7. I don't know at this point if 5 and 7 is really right, because I think they could trip up in one of those games. But I think 5 and 7 is pretty fair. I think Stanford's a decent team, but they have a tough schedule. So I think I will go over for them though and give them 5 and 7. But it's either going to be 5 and 7 or it's going to be 4 and 8. But I think at least from what I've picked, I'll give them 5 and 7.
This Stanford team is just a far cry from what it was a few years ago. Remember the days of which they had, like the Christian McCaffreys and the Bryce Loves and all those really, really good running backs. Those are the great days for Stanford. Those days for the Cardinal were just incredible. Now, all they have is Tanner McKee. That's all they have. Other than that, the rest of their team just sucks.
A bunch of tough games.
But they'll easily beat Colgate. And then they'll lose the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, you see them losing that. You have losing there.
I'm not. This is not a great Stanford team. I like Arizona State's team. I think they're all right.
Arizona State, but the actual Arizona State fan is on my team. You'll see in the Pac-12 South how low I am on Arizona State. I'm very low on it.
Then for their game against Washington State, they might beat the Cougars, but I don't know about that. They'll beat Cal. They don't beat BYU. They get 2 or 3 wins. That's about it.
Yeah, I feel like they're either going to go 5 and 7 or they're going to go really bad. So this team was tricky, but definitely not great.
I'm going.
And then we go to.
Yeah, so that's under. I think you're at 4.5.
Yeah, that'd be under.
Yeah, way under.
And then we go to Cal, who has a win total of 5.5. Wow, very high for Cal, I say.
Way too high.
You've got the first 2 games aren't bad. UC Davis and UNLV, and then they go on the road to Notre Dame, which they get absolutely slaughtered. then they got Arizona at home, so that's nice. That's nice. Then they go on the road to Washington State. They go on the road to Colorado. Play at home against Washington. USC, Oregon State, Stanford, and UCLA to round out the year. I have them going 4 and 8. I have their wins being UC Davis, UNLV, Arizona, and Washington. I have them losing to everybody else. I have them losing on the road to Notre Dame and Washington State. I could see them maybe tripping up Stanford because Stanford's not that great. But wins, which would still be under that 5.5 win total. So I'm definitely going under on Cal.
Yeah, they're not getting 6 wins. They won't be bowl eligible. I'm going under for this team. I could honestly, this Cal team is so bad. It's so bad they could lose. I mean, I could easily see it being like a big upset and they lose to UC Davis. They probably won't, but I think it's certainly possible. They could always lose to UNLV too, but I'll give them both of those games at least. Arizona sucks. They'll beat Arizona. Colorado, I think, is a 50-50 game, and then they lose the rest. So they get, at best, 3 wins, maybe 4. They ain't getting anywhere near 6. So, yeah, I'm going significantly under for that.
And that is the Pac-12 North. Check us next time for the Pac-12 South. Again, you can click any links for it and the links for the new videos. Go check out our other over-unders. We've done the Big Ten thus far and probably recording a little bit later for the other conferences, but we're going to finish the Pac-12 today. So, anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.